Okay, I know what a lot of you guys are probably thinking. You're probably thinking blasphemy or that I just don't know shit about Spider-Man. But hear me out here. This video isn't about how good the movie are. I like the Sam Raimi's movie a lot more than The Amazing Spider-Man. Matter of fact, I hate The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think it's the worst Spider-Man movie ever made. And I actually like the Tom Holland movie. Even if they're not the most accurate, I find those movies really enjoyable to watch. But with that said, this video is about which of those three is the most accurate depiction of the character from the comics. And like the title suggests, I think the winner is The Amazing Spider-Man, which actually surprised me. But again, you need to understand on what exactly I'm referring to when I claim this statement. Spider-Man is a character that has been around for decades, and with multiple writers being in charge of the character, he has gone through multiple different interpretations, and has changed a lot along the way. So in order to make this video, I had to choose which version of the character I will be looking at. So I decided to choose mostly the original Stan Lee run of the character, but I will also be looking at other early story. This run is one that introduced a lot of the most iconic story, ally and enemy of the web slinger. So everything I will say is based off the original version of the character. Let's say from chapter 1 up to chapter 150 or 200 is the classic era of the character. This is what we'll be looking at, but I will mostly refer to the first 100 chapters. Okay, with that said, I want to get another thing out of the way. I will not be looking at The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because frankly, it's trash. So this video is about why The Amazing Spider-Man 1 is actually the most accurate version of the character we have in live action. So with that said, let's go. Okay, let's get the superficial stuff out of the way. This version of Peter Parker has Gwen Stacy as his first real girlfriend, like in the comic. Which is great in my opinion, because I think Gwen Stacy is an important part of Peter Parker's life, and it was really refreshing to see this relationship in another media than the comic. I don't mind them making MJ his first real love in the other movies, but as someone who liked Peter and Gwen, I'm glad that they decided to go with Gwen in this movie, and this is surely more comic accurate. The second aspect is one that a lot of people have pointed out to death when the first movie came out, but this Spider-Man shoot web using web shooter instead of having organic web. I always like better the web shooter because they can run out or break, which can put Peter in a lot of trouble, so this is a good thing to keep. But then again, sometimes it doesn't really matter because the writer doesn't do much with it. But with that said, it's still more comic accurate. It's a bit more subjective, but a lot of people seem to agree with me here that Andrew's version of the character does more quips than the other, and overall feel like he's having more fun being Spider-Man.
You know, in the future, if you're gonna steal cars, don't dress like a car thief, man.
What are you? You a cop?
Really?
Sure, Toby did some quips and Holland too, but this one is more easygoing in my opinion, like the one from the comics.
Just let me go.
Is that a knife? Is that a real knife?
Yes, it's a real knife.
My weakness, it's small knives.
Now this is something a lot of you may not know. While his suit is much less accurate than the Sam Raimi's one, there is one aspect from his look as Spider-Man that is closer to the original intent of the suit. When Stan Lee wanted to make his new superhero a Spider-Man, he asked Jack Kirby to draw the character, but when he was shown his concept art he was disappointed, because this version felt too heroic to him. He wanted something a little bit scarier, he wanted his Spider-Man to be creepier, doing almost inhuman pose while walking on walls. So he asked Steve Ditko to draw the character, and he ended up with this design. He wanted a character that is half a weird creature and half a superhero in design, which is why the character was portrayed this way in the original Amazing Fantasy. And that creepy aspect of the character is much more present in the Amazing Spider-Man version of the character than any other live-action version. Especially in that scene. In that scene he almost feels like a bad guy. This version feels much more threatening than any other live-action version of Spider-Man, and this is closer to what was originally intended by Stan Lee for the character. In the comic he became Spider-Man for the money at first, not really to help his family or anything, he just wanted to make a few bucks, and after his uncle was killed he put on the suit filled with revenge in order to take down his killer. So yeah, he did become the Spider-Man for revenge. I hear a lot of people complain that Andrew's version of Peter becomes Spider-Man for selfish reason and that they don't like him putting the suit for revenge, while it is actually closer to the original version of the character. Peter became Spider-Man for selfish reason and put back the suit for revenge, which is also kinda how it goes in the Sam Raimi verse, but he doesn't wear the real suit when he was after his uncle's killer. But with all that said, the funny part is that even after he found his Uncle Killer, he still didn't put on the suit for the good of others, at least not in the traditional superhero way of things. But really he did to make money, this time to help his family. Sure, it's a good cause to help his family, but it's not like he did it out of complete selflessness. He still helped the people close to him and didn't become the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man who helped everyone just cause he can. There's even a full chapter where he go after Vulture just to take a few pictures of him to get money without really trying to take him down. He never really says something like, oh no, I need to take down this criminal because he might cause damage, but instead all he talked about is how he need to make money by taking picture of this guy. He only really did take out the Vulture because he kept on attacking him. I mean, sure, he helps people when he can, but he doesn't go out of his way to do so at first, which is actually closer to the selfish, self-centered nature of Andrew Spider-Man for the first half of the film.
He's hunting down a bunch of criminals that all look the same, like he's got some sort of personal vendetta. But he's not protecting innocent people, Mr. Parker.
In The Amazing Spider-Man, he becomes Spider-Man to catch the person who killed his uncle, exactly like in the comic version. Both versions started for selfish reasons but had to learn the meaning of responsibility through action they had to make. Even after knowing that it was their fault that their uncle died, they still had a hard time to understand the meaning of responsibility. Those words are not that easy to abide to. This Peter had to go through a much closer character arc to the one from the comic in order to become Spider-Man than Tobey did. A surprisingly more accurate Peter Parker. There's this misconception about Peter Parker that goes around making people think that Peter Parker is exactly like Tobey's version of the character, him being this easily bullied, shy, awkward reject with a heavy lack of self-confidence. While I do like this interpretation of the character, this is again not how Peter Parker was in the comics. Peter Parker from the comic is not really a reject. Like, it's not that he can't be popular, it's that he doesn't want to. He's someone that doesn't feel the need to be popular, he's someone that doesn't feel the need to have a lot of friends. There's multiple moments where you can see other kids asking him if he want to hang out and he tend to refuse. It's not like he don't want to have friends, it's just that he don't feel like he need friends, which is something Peter will grow out of in college and going forward. He is a loner by choice, which is way closer to how he is in The Amazing Spider-Man. Peter is not this hardcore bullied reject like he is in the Raimi's film. He is just this guy doing his own stuff and that's how he is in the comics. I mean, sure, Flash kinda bullied him in the comic by calling him name, but Peter is quick to get back at him with his own sassy comments.
Put it down. Gordon, don't eat it, don't eat it.
Take the picture, Parker. Take the picture.
Put him down! Eugene!
Another aspect of the character that a lot of people seem to don't understand is that Peter is awkward, yes, but it's not like he has no game. If you read the comic where he talked to MJ or Gwen in the earlier run, you see him saying stuff like this. A lot of people give Andrew's version shit for being flirty, but Peter from the comic can be flirty and chat when he talks to girls. The thing is, he is a awkward guy, and he can misunderstand situation or be a bit cringy at times, but he isn't a guy that can manage to pull out the dating game when he tries. And no, Andrew isn't too hot to be Peter Parker. The dude legit dated the two hottest girls in his college, and one of them became a top model. Peter is supposed to be a very good looking guy, but one that doesn't really show it to everyone. I mean, just read the bubble in this panel. This Peter is, believe it or not, closer to the comic version than the others, skateboard and all. I mean, sure, Tobey looked closer to the early look, but as the story progressed and he met Gwen, he became, well, let's say not so nerdy looking. Yeah, when Peter Parker was in college, he was kind of a Chad. And considering Peter left high school at around issue 20 out of 100 of the Stanley run, I think it was a good move to take inspiration for the character and how he was in the biggest part of the run. The Peter that was with Gwen in the comic, as he is in the movie. I mean, they're not exactly the same, but I think you can see the similarity, especially when they both wear leather jacket. I feel like a lot of the change are due to the time displacement and the shortening of the event of the comics. The original story was during the 60s, so yeah, the setting in the movie is way different. This is a version of Peter Parker set in the early 2000s, which might explain some of the change. But another aspect that I think contribute in making those two Peters slightly different is the fact that this movie adapted a large part of Peter's story from the comics. In the comic, he gets bitten by the spider in high school but only meet Gwen in college, so the story took Peter from college and dragged him back in high school in some way. To me, Peter in the comic is this black jacket, motorcycle riding Chad that get no shit from no one, but stays deep down a lovable science-loving goofball. So how do you translate that for high school in the 2000s? Well, you make him this skateboarding science nerd outcast with a cringy lovable charm. I mean, if you really want to keep him being a motorcycle riding badass that get the hottest girl in college but want to keep him in high school, I guess the closest thing you can do is keep everything but give him a skateboard instead. Trust me, I know a motorcycle is badass, but when you're a high school kid of the early 2000s, a skateboard is just as cool. When a lot of people talk about Peter Parker in the comic, they tend to just talk about how he was in the first 3 issues or in the Amazing Fantasy, but he isn't like that for more than like 15% of the run. Physically, this is what Peter Parker looked like in most of his time being written by Stan Lee. The Amazing Spider-Man is the most accurate version of the character we got in live action. He has the overall characterization that is much more closer to the one from the comic. A lot of people didn't like how selfish this Peter was, a Peter that became Spider-Man for revenge, a Peter too cool compared to Tobey's version, a Spider-Man that almost feel like a bad guy, a Spider-Man that fought for selfish reasons but ultimately had to learn his uncle's lesson through action, a Spider-Man that after saving a child from a burning car, got face to face with who he is, and had to ask himself, is this who I want to be? Is this who Spider-Man should be? And finally save New York as the hero he was destined to become. A Spider-Man and a Peter Parker that are a modern reflection of what Stan Lee envisioned for the character. The Amazing Spider-Man might not be my favorite Spider-Man movie, but I came to really love how accurate this representation of the character is in this movie, and I can't wait to see more of him in No Way Home, if he actually is in the movie. And him being the most accurate doesn't take away from those 2 other interpretations of the character, especially Tobey's version of the character, while yes, taking liberty with the character and lore, still managed to capture the essence of Spider-Man. And for real, that's what mattered the most. Sometimes I wonder if Amazing Spider-Man 2 wouldn't suck so bad, would this version of the character have become as loved as Tobey? Or is the general audience not interested in this closer interpretation? We will never know, but I came to really enjoy this version of Peter Parker. I feel like the problem with this movie isn't Peter Parker or Spider-Man, but everything around it. Sure, his parents being super spy is accurate to the comics, but we don't need this in this coming-to-age story. Peter Parker discovering the secret behind his parents' death while living a normal high school life didn't balance well for me. I feel like the story didn't have much room to breathe, if that make any sense. And the bad guy being so bland didn't help either. But with all that said, I still like this movie. It might not be the best overall, but I think it would be a shame to write off this version of Peter Parker cause we enjoy more the other movies. Anyway, I'm sure that some people might disagree with me, some people might agree with me. Leave all that in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. And with that said, peace out.
See you, chump.